Take a look at the outer layer of your skin. Biologically, the human epidermis is composed of 100% dead keratinized cells. That layer of dead cells performs a critical function. It acts as biological armor, a strict boundary protecting the living, functioning tissue underneath it. Now, consider the traditional theological rule of the Garden of Eden, an environment characterized by the total absence of death. If Adam and Eve walked through the garden with a human epidermis, then a layer of dead cells, actual death, already existed on their bodies long before the fall. We can see this contradiction outlined in the text right here. If God originally created humanity covered in dead cells, he would be the author of death, incorporating mortality into our design before it was ever earned. Because Genesis describes a deathless creation, the first humans must have possessed a physical anatomy vastly different from what we see in the mirror today. The Genesis narrative describes Eden as a realm of total, uninterrupted life. It features the tree of life and the river of life, supporting an environment completely devoid of decay. To resolve the biological conflict, we have to look at the text's specific anatomy. Pre-fall humans did not possess an epidermis. Without that dead outer layer, the human exterior consisted entirely of the living dermis. Imaging the eternal light of the Word, this glory-bearing flesh functioned perfectly as a radiant, light-bearing surface. Existing as pure, living tissue explains why the narrative describes the first humans as being naked yet unashamed. There was no dead boundary to hide. Humanity's original design was 100% living flesh, meant to reflect divine light. This was the specific physical state lost at the fall. When the fall occurs, God gives a highly specific warning: dying you shall die. This is the immediate onset of biological mortality, a process beginning the exact moment the rule is broken. The traditional interpretation of what happens next in Genesis 3:21 claims that God kills an animal to make clothes of skin, initiating the first blood sacrifice. But an audit of that verse reveals no named animal, no shed blood, and no altar. The specific Hebrew verb used is asa, meaning to manufacture or assign a new function to existing material. God caused the already present biological boundary to function as a covering. The dead outer layer of cells began to form over the living dermis. The garments of skin describe the biological birth of our own epidermis, the physical manifestation of mortality written directly onto the human body. Assuming a bloody animal sacrifice occurred in Eden forces us to read the next generation's story through the lens of a later legal system. In the story of Cain and Abel, the common assumption is that God demanded a slaughtered animal to atone for sin, but the actual Hebrew word used for Abel's offering, mincha, describes a gift, tribute, or present. The passage explicitly avoids the Hebrew terms for blood atonement, like olah or chatat. Abel's offering was accepted because it was a synchronous gift of faith and love, not because of blood chemistry. God did not demand the slaughter of innocent animals to cover guilty humans before the Levitical laws were established thousands of years later. If God didn't spill blood in the garden and Abel didn't spill blood on his altar, when exactly does blood enter the human story? The fall initiated a progressive collapse of human morality that peaks in Genesis 4:8, when human hatred is finally made flesh. The record shows that the very first blood ever shed in the biblical narrative was human blood, spilled when Cain murdered his brother. The text states that this human blood cried out to God from the ground. It was the first demand for justice, marking the final completion of humanity's fall. The uncorrupted narrative of Genesis describes a tragedy, the biological onset of human mortality, followed by the introduction of human-on-human violence. Our epidermis is a physical memorial of that shift. It is a protective barrier of death that covers the living, light-bearing glories still waiting to be restored beneath.